welcome to teaching learning session of sociology. In today's session, we'll start with sociology of India. First of all, let us describe the social background of the emergence of sociology in India. According to Abraham, sociology is a humanistic social science. So it has to take into account the specific ideas, ideals, values, aspirations, problems, and dilemmas of a concrete group, particularly historical circumstances, even when it tries to attain generalization about human relations. India has a rich heritage of thinking and reflection on socio-cultural reality. There have been recorded observations on Indian society since 3rd century BC. India has a millennium old living traditions contained in religious and philosophical texts. Socio-economic condition of India at the time of British rules. The establishment of British domain in 18th century prompted a rapid acquisition of knowledge of the classical languages of India, structure of the society, their values, manners, and by the British officials and the missionaries. There are three major approaches of the Westerners to Indian society and culture. So let us discuss the three approaches of the Westerners they have for Indian society and the culture. By the end of the 18th century, three type of Western interpretation of Indian reality become evident: the Orientalist approach, the missionary approach, and the administrative approach. What is Orientalist approach? The Orientalists were captivated by Indian spiritual tradition, mythology, philosophy, etc. Their dependence on textual view led to a picture of Indian society as being static, timeless, and spaceless. So, according to Orientalist approach the Indian society is static, it is timeless, it is spaceless, because according to them the Indian culture is, or the India is captivated by the traditional mythology, philosophy, and spiritualism. So because of these things, Indian society is static, it's timeless and spaceless. The missionaries, who were extremists of the Christian religious tradition, looked at it as a socio-cultural and ethnic system which needed total religious tradition. Looked at it as a social and ethnic system which needed total religious conversions. So Orientalists looked at it as a static, timeless, and spaceless. And according to the missionaries, they looked they looked at the socio-cultural and ethnic system of India, and according to them, the socio-cultural and ethnic system needed total religious conversion. Both the group agreed emergence of sociology in India, that Hinduism as practiced within the territory of their observations. Though the Orientalists considered the situation of their contemporary India as a fall from golden age, and the missionaries added lot of empirical study of Indian society, which was strengthened by the administrators. The interpretation of Indian reality by the administrators trained by the British University and trained by the utilitarian rationalism was more pragmatic and more matter of fact. Their purpose was to understand it in order to exploit its resources. The administrator sought to develop categories that would help them in ordering their ideas. and actions relating to the life of native of India, avoiding the enormous complexities characterizing it. So there are three approaches. The Orientalist approach, the missionary approach, and the administrative approach. So, according to the Orientalist approach, India is a static, timeless society. According to missionaries approach, India is led by the religious sentiments, and there need to be change in their. There need to be a drastic religious change. Then comes the administrative approach. This administrative approach was it is this group was right developed by the British universities and trained by the utilitarian rationalism. So they looked. So they tried to understand the Indian society in order to exploit its resources. How can they exploit its resources? Right. So they develop the categories that would help them to achieve their targets. Example, B.H. Baden-Powell's three volumes of Land System of British India were not just a compilation of data but contained a series of arguments about the nature of Indian villages and its resources in relation to the state and its demand over these resources. So they try to understand about the Indian resources, how they can exploit Indian resources, how they can consume Indian resources to earn more profit. And in this, the administrative approach tries to understand the resources of India, and in order to exploit those resources, they studied the Indian society. And example is B.H. Baden-Powell's three volumes of Land System of British India. Baden-Powell strongly contested Henry Mann's view that there was only one type of Indian village, that is politically autonomous and economically self-sufficient village community. So according to Henry Mann and Baden-Powell, the Indian villages are politically autonomous and they are self-sufficient to exploit their resources. It continued to fascinate both Western thinkers as Marx and Metcalfe, and Indians. Metcalfe observed the village communities seems to be last when nothing else lasts. The idea of unchanging village community was incorporated into general social theory of the later 19th century and 20th century. The Indian nationalists, on the other hand, came to rely on R.C. Dutt's Economic History of India to establish that it was the evils of British imperial rule which degraded India from this restful state of a village republic with agricultural prosperity to the condition of stagnated rural economy dominated by moneylenders and landlords. So, according to Indian nationalists, British are responsible for this the development of money lenders and landlords, and because of the British rule, there was this restful state of the village republics. When they were self sufficient, it turned into a money lenders and a landlord type of a system. Early sociological beginnings. Karl Marx and Max Weber, as well as Durkheim, depended on the British and the continental writings on India for their analysis of Indian society and culture. W.H.R. Rivers' study on todas was based on intensive fieldwork and was the first monograph on a people of India in modern anthropological tradition. So before that, the every writing on the India was based on the previous writings on the British and continental writings. But W.H.R. River was the first he studied about the Toda tribe, and it was the first field work. It was the first monograph on the people of India. Two of his students, that is student of Rivers, G.S. Gure and K.P. Chattopadhyay, came to play a significant role in development of sociology and anthropology in India. A reverse study was followed by A.R. Radcliffe Brown on the Andaman Islanders. During the first 2 decades, two Indian scholars, L.K. Anantha Krishna Iyer and S.C. Roy, made their mark in anthropology, though both of them lacked any formal training in the discipline. Roy research work among the tribes of Bihar. He founded and edited a famous journal, Man in India. Iyer, because of anthropological writings, was appointed to a lecturership in anthropography in Calcutta University, which surfaced the way of the first university department of anthropology in India. Vijayendra Nath Seal, as a professor of philosophy at Calcutta University, Seal lectured, and initiated study on what he called a comparative sociology. The recognition of sociology as an separate academic discipline came much later than the economics or the political sciences in Indian University, and the first department of sociology and civics started in the Bombay University in 1919 under the leadership of Sir Patrick Geddes. In this country, he was known for his interest in town planning with emphasis on the problems of urban deterioration. His reports on the town planning of Calcutta, Indore, and the temple cities of the South India contain most useful information and displays his acute awareness of the problems of the urban disorganization and renewal. Right? Then Radha Kamal Mukherjee, the pioneer of Lucknow School of Sociology in India, was also influenced by Geddes as he came in association with Geddes in urban survey. G. H. Ghure obtained a doctorate from Cambridge mainly on his work on the caste. Ghure himself wrote effectively on the great emergence of sociology in India, 23 varieties of themes. Ghure's knowledge of Sanskrit enabled him to use the scriptures and epics in analyzing and interpreting Indian culture and society. He insisted on the field work, though he himself was an armchair sociologist. Then another Lucknow University became another center of sociology and anthropology because of Radha Kamal Mukherjee, Drujyoti Prasad Mukherjee, and D.N. Majumdar. D.P. Mukherjee acknowledges the relevance of Indian tradition and philosophy for arriving at a theoretical and conceptual schemes of study of Indian society. DP does not totally rejected the Marxian contribution, particularly its dialectical logic articulating the century of process of conflict and contradiction of social processes. A combined department of sociology and anthropology under the leadership of the Iravati Karve was started in 1930 in Deccan College and a postgraduate research institute in Pune. Karve authors Karve's work on the kinship is very famous. She extensively studied about the kinship organization in India and did field work in the different parts of the country, and her knowledge of Sanskrit gave her the access to data in scriptures, laws, books, and epics. story of early beginning of sociology in India should mention the contribution of Nirmal Kumar Bose. His approach was historical, but he insisted on the field work by the researcher without any prejudgment in the mind. The study of sociology and social anthropology gradually and slowly became professionalized during 1910 and the 19 during between 1910 and 50. Autonomous department of these two subjects did not exist in more than half a dozen of universities. The Bombay University was the center of postgraduate research in sociology when India became independent. India, as we say, that India is a country of unity in diverse. India is a country of diverse unity in diversity. So let us understand the concept of what is unity and diversity. Diversity means collective difference. That is difference which marks of one group of people from another group. That is what the diversity. Diversity means difference that marks the difference that marks of one group of people from another. The difference between the group of people is known as diversity. The difference may be because of the biological reasons, because of the religion, on the basis of linguistic. The differences could be on the basis of language, right? On the basis when we have a difference on the basis of biology, then we have a then that is called as a racial diversity, right? The term diversity is opposite to uniformity. Uniformity means similarity of some sort that characterizes the people. Uni refers to one and form to the common ways. So, what is uniformity? When people are similar in some way, that is known as uniformity. Diversity, when there is a difference between the people of when there is a difference between one group and the another group. Uniformity, when there is some sort of similarity between groups, that is known as uniformity, right? Diversity means variety. For all practical purposes, it means a variety of group and culture. We have such a variety in abundance in India. We have here a variety of races, a variety of religion, a variety of languages, caste, and culture. And some reasons India is known as for because of this reason India is known for its socio-cultural diversities. India, that is we call India. There is a unity in India. There is a unity in diversity. India is a state of diversities. What is unity? Unity means integration. It is a social psychological condition. It means sense of oneness and a sense of we-ness. It stands for the bond which hold the members of society together. When we say that we all are Indians, despite of our racial differences, despite of our caste differences, despite of our religion differences, when we go abroad, we say that we are Indians. This is known as unity. Unity means a sense of oneness, right? People from the different religion when meet somewhere outside India, they say that we are Indians. Despite of their diversities, despite of diversities in their religion, biological differences, caste religion differences, there is a feeling of oneness. There is a feeling of oneness, and this feeling is known as unity. It stands for the bond which holds the member of society together. This unity holds the members of the society together. There is a difference between the unity and uniformity. Uniformity presupposes similarity. Unity does not. Thus, unity may or may not be based on uniformity. Unity may be born out of uniformity. Durkheim calls this type of unity as a mechanical solidarity. We find this type of unity in tribal society and in traditional societies. Mechanical solidarity is found in tribal or the traditional society. As we explained, what is unity? Unity is it's a psychological condition. It is a sense of oneness. While uniformity means similarity of some sort that characterize the people, right? There is a uniformity of some sort, right? So there is a difference between uniformity and unity. Uniformity presupposes similarity. It presupposes that there is some similarity between the group, but unity does not. Unity may or may not based on uniformity, because we are similar there. It doesn't mean that there must be unity. Unity may or may not be based on the uniformity. Unity may be born out of uniformity. It may or may not be. It may be born out of uniformity, and when unity born out of uniformity, then that is known as mechanical solidarity. Unity may as well be based on the differences. It is a such unity which is described by the Durkheim as an organic solidarity, and this unity is characterized in modern society. Durkheim discussed two types of solidarities: mechanical solidarities and organic solidarities. Mechanical solidarities are basically found in tribal and the traditional societies. When unity is based on the uniformity, then that is known as a mechanical solidarity, right? That is a unity between a group of same profession, right? That is mechanical solidarity. They are united because of their profession. There is a uniformity. While when the unity is not based on the uniformity, but we are dependent on each other because of reasons, right? Then that is known as organic solidarity. Forms of diversities in India. uh, in India, diversity could be because of biological reasons, that is racial. It could be on the basis of languages, linguistic diversity, then religious diversity, and the caste based diversity. Racial diversity: a race is a group of a people with a set of distinctive physical features such as skin color, type of nose, form of hair, right? Herbert Ridgely has classified people of India into seven racial types. See, in India, even on the basis of race, there are seven types of groups, according to Herbert Ridgely. And these groups are Turco-Iranian, Indo-Aryan, Cyto-Dravidian, Aryo-Dravidian, Mongolo-Dravidian, Mongoloids, and Dravidians. These seven racial types can be reduced to three basic types: the Indo Aryan, the Mongolian, and the Dravidian. So, according to Riesle, there are seven racial types in India. Racial, what is racial diversity? When it is based on the distinctiveness in the physical features. So, according to Riesle, we can divide on the basis of divide the people of India into seven groups on the basis of races. Right? He divided it into seven groups, and then these seven racial groups can be reduced to the three basic types. That these three basic types is Indo-Aryan, Mongolians, and the Dravidians. Other administrative officers and anthropologists like J.H. Hutton, D.N. Majumdar, and B.S. Guha have given the latest racial classification of Indian people based on the further researches in field. Hutton's and Guha's classifications are based on 1931 census. Right? So Guha has identified the six racial types: the Negroids, the Proto-Australoids, Mongoloids, Mediterranean, Western Brachycephals, and the Nordic. Right? So they have divided it into six groups. Then, what is linguistic diversity? Linguistic diversity is uh, when there are the differences in the languages, and India, there are many languages. 18 languages are listed in Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitutions. 18 languages are listed in the Schedule 8 of Indian Constitution. So see, there are 18 types of the languages, at least 18 types of the languages which were listed in the Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution. And these languages are Assamese, Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Kashmiri, Konkani, Malayalam, Manipuri, Marathi, Nepali, Oriya, Punjabi, Sanskrit, Sindhi, Tamil, Telugu, and Urdu. Out of these 18 languages, Hindi is spoken by 39.85% of total population. Bengali, Telugu, and Marathi by around 8%, Tamil and Urdu by 6.26% and 5.22% respectively. Constitutionally recognized language belongs to two linguistic families, that is the Indo-Aryan and the Dravidian. These languages, these 18 languages, which are scheduled in um, uh, Constitution Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution. These are based on these languages belongs to two linguistic family, that is Indo-Aryan family and the Dravidian family. Malayalam, Kannada, Tamil, Telugu are the four major Dravidian languages. The languages of Indo-Aryan family are spoken by the 75% of India's total population, while the languages of Dravidian family are spoken by the 20%. Right? Then there is a religious diversity in India. India is a land of multiple religion. We find here the followers of Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, Buddhism, Jainism, and many others. Then there are sects within each religion. Apart from the religion, there are sects in the religion. Hinduism, for example, has many sects, and like Shiva, Shakta, Vaishnava. There are sects. Add to them sects born or religious reform movements such as the Arya Samaj, Brahma Samaj, Ramakrishna Mission, right? And then there are cults that have come up, such as Radha Swami, Sai Baba, right? Similarly, Islam is divided into Shia and Sunni, Sikhism into Namdhari and Nirankari, Jainism into Digambar and Shwetambar, and Buddhism into Hinayan and Mahayan. So there is a diversity on in the religion. India is a land of multiple religion. Apart from the religion, there are sects. There are cults. Then there is a diversity on the basis of caste. Caste is the base of Indian society. The caste The term caste is generally used in two senses, sometimes in the sense of varna and sometimes in the sense of jati. Varna refers to the segment of fourfold division of Hindu society based on the functional criteria. Uh, in Hindu society, that on the basis of division of labor, it has been divided into four varnas, right? And the four varnas are Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And they are specialized, and it is on the basis of their functions, right? And these have been divided into four with their specialized functions. Brahman's function is learning, Kshatriya's function is to defend, Vaishya's function is to trade, and Shudra is to manual services, right? This Varna hierarchy is acceptable all over India. Jati refers to the hereditary endogamous status, group practicing a specific traditional or occupation. That what is Varna when there is a division on the basis of the functions. While Jati is hereditary endogamous status of a group, and it is on the basis of a specific tradition, traditional occupation, right? When we divide a group on the basis of a traditional occupation, then that is known as jati. There are more than 300,000 jatis in India. There are hierarchical graded in different ways in different regions. The practice of caste system is not confined to Hindus only. It is among the Muslim, Christian, Sikhs as well as other communities. Major form of diversity. We have diversity of many other sorts like settlement pattern, like tribals, rural people, urban. Then there is differentiation on the basis of marriage, on the basis of kinship pattern, along with religious and regional lines. Cultural patterns reflected the regional variations and so on. So there is a diversity on the basis of region, on the basis of religion, on the basis of culture, on the basis of languages, on the basis of cults, on the basis of jatis, on the basis of biology, right? So bonds of unity in India. Although there is a diversity in Indian society, but still there is a unity in that diversity. Indian society is united. What Let us discuss the bonds of unity in India. There are bonds of unity underlying all diversities. These bonds of unity may located in certain uniformity of life as well as certain mechanism of integration. Census Commissioner in 1911, and the Herbert Risley was the Census Commissioner in 1911. Herbert Risley was Herbert Risley observed beneath the manifold diversity of physical and the social types, languages, custom, religion, which strikes the observer in India, there can still be a certain underlying uniformity of life from Himalayas to Cape Comorin. So he also observed, despite of the diversities of the Indian society, there are still uniformity and unity in the Indian society. Bonds of unity of India are geopolitical unity, the institution of pilgrimage, tradition of accommodation, and the tradition of interdependence. Geopolitical unity, that is when there is a unity on the basis of geopolitics. The first bond of unity is found in geopolitical integration. India is known for its geographical unity, marked by Himalayas in the north and oceans on the other sides. Right? So there is a unity because of the geography. When we are living in a certain vicinity, there is a unity among the people. And politically, India is a sovereign state. They have follow the same constitution, the same parliament governs every part of it, and we in India share the same political culture marked by the norms of democracy, secularism, and the socialism. So, because of our geography, we are united. Because of our politics, we are united. Because all parts of India are governed by the same parliament, the same government rule the all parts of the India. Right, the same parliament governs the India, and there is a same political culture everywhere in India. The expression of the consciousness of geopolitical unity of India are found in Rig Vedas, and Rig Veda is a Sanskrit written in the Sanskrit language. It is also found in the laws of Ashoka, in Buddhist monuments, and in various other resources. The ideal of geopolitical unity of India is also reflected in concept of Bharatvarsha, the old indigenous classical names of Bharatvarsha, the old indigenous classical name for India, right? The institution of pilgrimage unites the India. right? That is another source of unity in India, and it lies in the temple culture, which reflected a network of shrines and sacred places. From Badrinath and Kedarnath to Rameshwaram to Jagannath Puri to Dwarka, and holy rivers are spread throughout the length and the breadth of the country. And we move from one place to another, from Badrinath to Kedarnath to Dwarka to Rameshwaram. Closely related to them is the age old culture of pilgrimage, which was also always moved people to the various parts of the country and fostered in them the sense of geocultural unity. When you move from one place to another place, this unites the country together. Being an expression of religious sentiment, pilgrimage is also an expression of love for motherland, a short mode of worship of the country. It has played a significant part in promoting interaction and cultural affinity among the people living in the different parts of the India. See, when India is geographically, India is very vast. It's a big country, and when we move from one place to another, say for darshanas of any temple, that we come to know about the culture, about the people of that particular area, and this promotes the interaction and the cultural affinity among the people. And when there is an interaction and cultural affinity among the people, this unites the people of India together, right? Pilgrimage can be viewed as a mechanism of geocultural unity. When we come to know about each other, that yes, they are good people, right? Their culture is good. They follow this rituals because of this reason. When we come to know about this, this unite us together. Then another aspect which unites Indian together is tradition of accommodations. Indian culture has a remarkable quality of accommodations and tolerance. Then tradition of interdependence. India has a remarkable tradition of interdependence, which has held us together throughout the centuries. We are dependent on each other, right? We cannot perform all the tasks. We need help of others. A teacher needs help of a doctor needs a help of an engineer, an engineer needs a help of a teacher. So we need help of each other, and in this way, and all these things unite. This tradition of interdependence unite us. One manifestation of it is found in form of Jajmani system, that is a system of functional interdependence of a caste. Despite of the differences in the caste, we are dependent on each other. Example is the Jajmani system. Jajmani relations were conspicuous in village life as they entailed ritual matters, social support, as well as economic exchange. This Jajmani system is very important because this involves the economic exchange, right? This involves the social support. A landlord needs a barber for haircut, and in return, the landlord gives some money or something to the barber, right? Ritual, that is, and we need a social support of each other. The whole of local social order was involved in such Jajmani link. A pattern had Jajmani relation with member of a high caste. He also required the services of a specialist from lower jati to perform necessary tasks, like as I told that the landlord needs a barber, right? Those associated in these caste interdependent relationship were broadly supportive for each other with qualities of ready to help and generally close kinsmanship were expected to show. So there is the interdependence despite of their jatis. Even a higher caste needs the help of a lower caste, and lower caste needs higher caste for their survivals, right? The Jajmani relations usually involved multiple kinds of payments and obligation as well as multiple functions. Each caste was a functional group in that it rendered a specified services to other caste group. Jajmani system is that mechanism which was formalized and regulated this functional interdependence because we are functionally interdependent on each other. The institution of Jajmani provides for interlinkage between people of different religious groups. So, through Jajmani system, we are associated. So, tradition of interdependence unite us together, right? Meaning and nature of social change. Society changes. Society is not static; it's a dynamic, and it should be dynamic. Society changes from time to time, right? So, let us understand the meaning and nature of social change. In sociology, social changes is change that occurs in the social structure and social relationship. What is social change? Social change is that change which occurs in the social structure and social relationship. It is dynamic. So society is dynamic. It's not society. It's not static. So there is a change in the social relationships. There is change in social structure, right? There may be shifts in the norms, in the values, and the cultural products and symbols in this society, right? The changes implies that change in the structure and function of social system, institutions, patterns of interaction, work, leisure activities, roles, norms, and other aspects of society can be altered over a time as a result of process of social change. So there over a period of time there could be change in social system, there could be change in social institutions, there could be change in pattern of interaction, there could be change in activities, there could be change in norms, there could be change in values and other aspects of the society. So these changes are known as social change. There are three aspects of social change. Social change is essentially a process of alteration with no reference to quality of change. Second, social change in society are related or linked to change in culture, so that it would be sometime useful to talk about the social cultural change. Some sociologists differentiate between social change and cultural changes. Social change is defined as alteration in social structure only, including the changes in the size of the society, or in particularly social institution, or in relationship between the institutions. So, social changes is some sociologists define the social changes. As a change in or the alteration in social structure or in particularly social institutions or relationship between the institution. They feel that social changes refers mainly to the human behavior. Cultural changes refers to variation in cultural phenomenon such as knowledge, ideas, art, religion, and moral values, belief, symbols, and so on. The distinction is abstract because in many situations it is difficult or nearly impossible to decide the type of change what is occurring. So some sociologists define that change in the structure of the society is a social change, while cultural change is when there is change in the values, norms, knowledge, idea, art, religion, moral. But this line is very big. It is at times it becomes difficult to differentiate whether it is a social change or whether it's a cultural change. So say social cultural changes, right? Social changes can vary in its scope and speed, right? That changes can be small scale or large scale changes. Changes can be of cyclic pattern. It is also be revolutionary. Change can also include short-term changes as well as long-term changes in economic structure. Social changes, both growth and decline in membership and the size of the institution. So social changes could be of long-term changes or the short-term changes. Long-term changes could be like change in the institutions, right? And short-term changes is like rate of migration. This is a short-term change. People are migrating from one place to another, but it's a short-term change. They might come back to their place or they might migrate to some other place. So it could be a short-term change, right? Change may include a continuous process like specialization and also includes a discontinuous process such as particular technical or social invention. Social changes varies in the scope. It may influences many aspects of the society, and it and this social change can disrupt the whole social system. So their scope could be whether it could influence the whole aspect of the society, or it can disrupt the whole social system, right? The some changes occurs rapidly while other takes a long time. Change is natural, inevitable, and every present of life in every society changes over a period of time, right? Evaluation expresses continuity and direction of change. It means more than growth. Growth implies a direction of change, but essentially in size or quality. Evolution involves something more intrinsic, a change not only in size but in the structure. So every society evolves, every society grows, but every society evolves over a period of time. There is a change difference between the growth and evolution. A growth implies a direction of the change, right? It could be essentially in the size or the quality, right? Change society, super society is expanding or contracting, a group is expanding or a group is contracting, right? It depends on the size, it depends on the quality. But evolution is evolution is something more intrinsic. It is not only in the change in the in the size, but it is a change in the structure, right? Evolution is a continuous process, and there is a direction of a change. That a society always evolve. The evolution is a continuous process, and over a period of time this society evolves. It never happens that suddenly a society evolves from one state to another state. It's a continuous process, and it's there is a direction of change, right? It's a slow process. Evolution is a slow process. It is something more intrinsic, right? Progress implies change in direction towards some final desired goals. All changes are not evolutionary and all changes are not progressive. See, what is another term is progress, and progress is a change in direction, a change in the direction which helps us to attain our goals, right? And it involves a value judgment. All changes are not evolutionary and all changes are not progressive. There is a change in the society always changes, but all changes could not be evolutionary. It's not compulsory that if there is a change in the society, society has evolved. No, evolution is an intrinsic process. It's a long term process, right? It defines the directions of a change. It could be cyclic process. It is a cyclic process, but It is not necessary that all changes are evolutionary, and all changes could not be progressive. What is progressive? Progressive changes means while change in the direction towards some final desired goal. When we change ourselves, or when the society or a group changes itself to attain the final desired goals. But every time if there is a change in a group or a society, it doesn't imply that that change is progressive or that change is evolutionary. It is not compulsory. Sociological theories and concept of social change. Human societies are always in transition. Experiences are dynamic changes and passing through a old stage to enter into new. They are ever changing and they grow, decay, expand technologically, and develop. The process. In this process, they experience modification in their values, in their ideologies. The institutions and population undergo a variation over a period of time. So it's a cyclic process. In early sociological writings, the term and notion of development and change are used interchangeably. So, development and change interchangeably. The clear distinction could either not be made, or if made, they were not treated as logically related terms. In many early sociological theories of 19th and early 20th century, the notion of change, development, evolution, and progress are sometimes confused or combined into a single term. Although there is a difference between these terms, there is a difference in the change, development, evolution, and progress. But in 19th century, they are treated as synonyms. So Auguste Comte, Auguste Comte is known as the father of sociology. He tried to understand social changes that occurred in the early years of the Industrial Revolution as an evolutionary process. Evolution implies gradual transformation or change through a series of stages. The theory of evolution explains that society passes through a number of stages, starting from a simple form and becoming more complex as a process of evolution progresses. Auguste Comte put forward the idea of evolutionary change and also related the idea of progressive change through the development of intellect, in particularly scientific thoughts. He was of the opinion that the human mind, human society, and human knowledge all went through a process of development and change from metaphysical to positivism. Metaphysical, that is non scientific, to positivism. Positivism is scientific. So, theories according according to Auguste Comte, there is an evolutionary change in the society. He tried to understand the changes in the society during industrial era, and he termed it as an evolutionary changes. And evolutionary changes is when a society underwent a number of changes, right? That is number of stages. When society underwent a number of stages starting from simpler one to more complex, then this is known as evolutionary progress, right? So Auguste Comte gave the idea of evolutionary change. According to him, that there is a change in society, that society goes through various stages starting from more complex to the more complex one. And he related the idea with the progressive change. That is, there is a change in the evolutionary change in the society, but this change is progressive society, this change is progressive type of change. Progressive, according to him, that progressive change is when society is moving from metaphysical stage to positivism stage. Metaphysical stage is non-scientific stage according to Comte, and positivism is the scientific state. So there is an evolution according to Auguste Comte. There is a evolutionary stage with the positive, with the with the there. This is a there is a evolution in the society, and this type of evolution is a progressive type of an evolution. When a society moves from various simple stages to more complex stages, and these stages are progressive type of the stages when the society moved from metaphysical stage to positivism stage. Then next theory was given by the Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer treated human society as a biological organism. According to him, that society is like a biological organism, and therefore tried to study the development of sense of change from within. In his opinion, social bodies are like living bodies, and thus with increase in size, their structure complexity too increases. And Spencer advocated an analogy between the society and the organism, and between social and the economic growth. Herbert Spencer actually has given the theory of evolution, evolutionary theory, a straight line theory. According to Herbert Spencer, that society moves from one stage to another stage in a linear fashion, that is that one stage to another stage in a linear fashion, that is the society moved from a simple to a complex society. And he compared the society with a human body or the organism, right? And he advocated an analogy between the society and organism, that as the number, as there is a change, there is a development in this society, right? Development in the sense that there is increase in the size, there is increase in the structural complexity, there is increase in the size of the institutions, there is changes in the institution, the structural complexities too increases, and society evolves from one stage to another stage. And uh, he advocated an analogy between the society and organism, and social and economic growth. So, according to Herbert Spencer, that society moves from one stage to another stage, from simple to complex stage in a linear fashion. Then Emile Durkheim conceived society in terms of evolutionary scheme. He talked about the social solidarity. He has given the concept of mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. By solidarity, he means the moral belief and the ideas which define the commonness underlying the social life. Like social evolutionist, he opined that pre-industrial societies' mechanical solidarity was based on the agreement and identity among people, while post-industrial societies' organic solidarity derived from agreement to tolerance, a range of differences, conflicts being moderate through a variety of institutional arrangement. So, Emile Durkheim also defined the society in terms of evolutionary scheme, right? He talked about the social solidarity. According to him, there are two types of solidarity: mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. In pre-industrial society, there is mechanical solidarity, when people are united together because of commonness among them, because they share some common things between them, then that is known as mechanical solidarity. And according to Durkheim, the post-industrial society, there is an organic solidarity. They are united, the people of society are united together. There is a solidarity among the people because they are dependent on each other, rather than being similar. So, see, organic solidarity, the solidarity is on the basis of interdependence rather than the commonness. Okay? Division of labor. Then he discussed about the division of labor, right? Division of labor was almost absent in pre-industrial society, while in post-industrial society there is a division of labor, because it was a highly specialized type of a society, and groups have been categorically defined on the basis of their specialization, right? Max Weber. Then Max Weber examined the question of development and change in context of his study on capitalism. According to him, culture is the key element in their development. Unlike Durkheim, he tried to find out what it was in people's religious and ethical belief that had enabled society, which started with a similar technological benefication to develop and change in quite different ways. So, Max Weber, according to Max Weber, society, there is a change in this society. He tried to answer the question of development and change, and his study is based on capitalism. He tried to understand what are the factors which are responsible for the difference in the changes of the society while they started from the same point, right? That's all for today. Thank you very much. Namaskar.